Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Ashley's webinar, Get Better Total Nutrition Simplified, the pros and cons of dietary supplements. This webinar will also be up on her Facebook and YouTube channel by the end of the week if you want to follow up or share it. There'll be a short Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please, there's a chat box on your screen, so please send us any questions you might have, and if time, Ashley will do her best to answer them. If you think of any questions later on in the week, feel free to reach out to us on Ashley's social media via Facebook or Twitter. She's always there and happy to answer questions. So without further ado, Ashley, let's get started.
Thank you. So yeah, today we're going to talk about Get Better Total Nutrition Simplified. And this one is really important to me. A good friend of mine once told me, I love this expression. She said, in our careers, Ashley, research is me search. And you know, for me, dietary supplements and learning about them is very personal. I think I've shared with a lot of you that when I was growing up, I had especially early in life, I was given a lot of antibiotics, a lot of ear infections, throat infections, and the cycle continued probably as I took more antibiotics. And it really all came to sort of coalesce, which happens for a lot of women in my late teens and early 20s. Little bit of skin stuff, really some bad digestive stuff, and I was really trying to help myself. I was a vegan, I was doing yoga, I was not drinking, I was trying to do everything that I could from a nutrition standpoint, and that's actually part of what got me so inspired to understand how food works in the body and how I could help myself. But you know, without the role of dietary supplements, I would not have been able to heal my digestive system. And as a practitioner, that was something that was really a game changer for me to learn about. I was really lucky very early on in my career to learn from some of the leading minds in this space, including one of them, Dr. Tiarona Lodog, who I met through Dr. Andrew Weil. She was working with his program at the time, and I was doing some consulting work there, helping teach their doctors a bit about nutrition. And I just was able to learn so much about dietary supplements, quality of supplements. If you don't know Dr. Lodog, you must get to know her. And it's so important to me that you get to know her. One of the things that we're doing in conjunction with today is giving away a copy of her book. I think Matt is going to pick somebody from today to give away a copy of her book, Fortify Your Life. I think it is one of the best books on dietary supplements currently, if not the best one, because I think it does a lot of what I'm talking about here, which is really helping you to simplify something that, well, just doesn't feel simple. I have had practitioners throughout the course of my career. One of the main reasons that other practitioners send their patients to me is to evaluate and to help them with selecting the proper supplements for their patients. They want to know, just like you want to know, is what they're going to recommend going to be effective, but also is it safe, and especially as it relates to the person's total nutrition. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today as we discuss the pros and cons of dietary supplements. And I want to take a moment to thank my sponsors. I think one of the most important things that I can point out is through the list of sponsors here. These are great friends of mine, partners of mine for years, but you will see that they are not all dietary supplement companies, and that is going to be really critical for us as we talk about how to figure out whether or not you need dietary supplements and what dietary supplements you need. Your food, remember, the definition of supplements is going to be really critical, and your food, your daily intake, is going to be the foundation from which you evaluate what you need from a dietary supplement standpoint. So if you've never tried any hemp foods, I cannot say enough about not just Manitoba Harvest, but the quality of nutrition that hemp foods delivers. Natural Vitality, we are going to be talking a lot about magnesium today. Magnesium, calcium, your minerals. I have learned so much from this company, and this is one of those. When I talk about one of the game-changing ingredients for me in healing my digestive system, it was Natural Calm Magnesium from Natural Vitality. True brock, I'm a huge fan of broccoli. I can't always get it in, and sometimes I need for myself or for my patients, I want the added benefits of glucoraphanin, which is the detox nutrient. It's a nutrient that supports your body's natural detoxification, especially for detoxifying and eliminating used hormones and toxins. So look for the True Brock logo. And Earthbound Farm and Nature's Path, I'm going to put them together because one of the most important things that we can do today is eat organic whole foods. And in both instances, in fruits and vegetables, as well as in whole grains, we often see that there's a lot of processing with those, and then we see fortification. And I'm going to talk about how fortification is very different than the use of dietary supplements and how the nutrition differences are. And one of the great things about Nature's Path and Earthbound Farm is that they both offer whole organic foods without the fortification, so you're really getting the nutrients as nature intended, especially in their in the least processed manner, minimally processed. Okay, so let's dive into this. So what do we all want? Better health. How are we going to get it? And then we were all confused. And I could put up 35 more confused faces with different signs with the name of different supplements, everything from herbs. Do I need adaptogens? What about maca? What about, do I want calcium? How much calcium, etc. So today what I want to answer again is how better nutrition addresses better health. But what we're really talking about today is better total nutrition. So I'm going to talk to you about what is better nutrition, and really that definition of total nutrition. What do you need? How should you get it? I want to walk through some case studies, some examples that I have from patients. I think you may identify with one, if not all of these. Give you some resources, and then as Matt said, I'm going to leave some time for Q&A. I've already seen a question pop up, so keep the questions coming. So the first thing for us to understand is that better nutrition is not just about what we're eating. Better nutrition is about what goes in and on you. And it has the ability to either enable better health, or it can also deduct from health if it's not better nutrition. And for those of you that joined me in the webinar about better beauty, we talked a lot about what goes on you in that space in terms of, when you're putting on your makeup, what you're putting on your skin. This time of year, we think a lot about sunscreen. I actually think about sunscreen all year round, especially as I get older and really want to make sure that I'm taking care of my skin. It's important for kids, obviously, to be thinking about at younger ages as well. But one of the things we have to think about today is that there are things that we are putting on our bodies that are actually dietary supplements. So one of my absolute favorites, Natural Vitality, has just come out with Calm Cream. And I use that. I tell people it's like my mini spa when I have to go on a long drive and you're going, wait a second, like driving for you is a spa situation? I'm like, yep. What I do is after a workout or after I shower, I put the Natural Calm Cream on my lower back, and sometimes I'll even put it on my thighs, but just definitely hitting that sacrum area. And then I turn on, no matter what time of year, and you can ask people who have driven with me, they think I'm crazy, but I turn on the butt warmers, is what I call them, and I get a little spa situation going, and it's phenomenal. So remember, what we're talking about when we're talking about nutrition is everything that goes on and in you, and part of that is your body is affected by everything that goes on and in you. And so we know that we can't control for all of our exposures to the different things that we're breathing or that are touching our body, and so it's really important for us to make sure that the things that we can control, we're focusing on better total nutrition. So what is better nutrition? So I've broken it down into what goes in you and what goes on you. And I want to take a moment here to talk about the distinctions between foods and supplements. And this is really how I think about it and how I explain it to my patients. You want to think about your food as a foundational role. By definition, a supplement is supplemental to a healthy diet. So there is no supplement that's out there that can correct for an ongoing poor quality diet. There are supplements that can help support you when you're maybe like I was just this last weekend at a conference, and maybe it wasn't the top of the line quality of foods that I try to eat at home. I'm not perfect at home either, but I do a much better job. And so when I'm traveling, I may include more supplements in my regime than when I'm home. But at the net, the foundation has to be your food. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the advantages of foods. Well, foods, as we know, we can get nature as intended in the amounts and in the blends. So one of my, some of my myth debunking that I do in other webinars, for example, when we talk about what is better nutrition, and we talk about the debate between, oh, should you have saturated fats or unsaturated fats, or should you get more monounsaturated fats or polyunsaturated fats? So there are no foods that exist in nature that are just an isolate of one fat. They have these whole blends, including even avocado, there's saturated fat in there, and there's monounsaturated fats in coconut oil. So, I think one of the things that we get confused about is that we think that, oh, I'm going to eat this food for this particular nutrient. You actually aren't. And as Michael Pollan often talks about and writes about, it's, the nutrientizing of our food is one of the more damaging trends that we've encouraged when we tell people to just eat. I could even say, like, oh, if I tell you to eat spinach for magnesium, well, you're also getting calcium, you're also getting vitamin K, you're also getting all these other things. So we want to remember one of the pros of food is that you get this beautiful blend of ingredients as intended in nature. You also get the plant-based compounds in there as well. Your foundation also builds your base. So we need a base of nutrition, and that is really going to be, again, it can be one that adds to your health or deducts for your health. The other thing that's really important about food sources, now again, when I say food sources, I'm talking about food sources, minimally processed, food sources that are found in nature, ideally organic, which means they're not sprayed, and they don't use genetically modified organisms as the seeds. But they reduce your risk of excess. And so one of the things that can end up happening is if I am taking a supplement, I might get 3 or 4 times the amount of calcium that I would get in an actual food, and that can throw things off. I could get too much vitamin A is one of the concerns that we have in dietary supplements, but I can pretty much go to town on kale or some of these other foods and not worry about the excess. The other part about food is we can and we should enjoy it, and we can and we should consume things that we tolerate, and sometimes we don't tolerate dietary supplements. We'll talk more about that, especially as it relates to pregnancy. What are some of the cons? Now, I am talking about some of the cons of food, or what I'll talk about here, let's call them challenges. Some of the challenges are the consistency. So I evaluate food journals all the time. I don't want people to be bored and eat the exact same thing all of the time. And so what can happen is, very well intentioned, as we kind of move from, oh, maybe at one point in time I'm in love with like making my own, cashew milk at home, and then later on I move over to having coconut milk. Well, I may have really changed the amount of nutrients that I'm getting from my food. And then the other things that are issues are access. I talked about travel. I also deal a lot with where you live, so a lot of times I find myself, it's surprising me, especially just, a short drive south of where I am in DC. Sometimes I love organic unsweetened tea, and a lot of times I cannot find tea, and tea is one of my go-tos for antioxidants during the day as well as for some caffeine, but it's really hard for me, and I won't consume the sweetened, so then I'm missing that nutrient, and that's something that unlike when I'm eating at home, I get it. And then the other part is sometimes we don't have all the choices available to us. Now, another con or a challenge is there may be a significant conflict between the amount that we need versus what is healthy eating. I'm going to get into this a little bit more, so I'll just tease this idea here. But I think it may surprise you, in order to meet the RDA, which is just the recommended dietary allowance, the amount that we want to get, that is for preventing disease. That's not even for optimal health in many instances. That we may actually have to eat an unhealthy amount of certain things in order to get our needs met. And so that really becomes a challenge and something we have to pay attention to. So on the flip side, when we talk about dietary supplements, what are some of the things that are pros? Well, one of the pros is it's very easy to achieve a consistent level of intake with dietary supplements, as long as you remember to take it each day, which I don't gloss over. I know that can be hard for people, but there is that part. The other thing that we can do very effectively and efficiently is we can establish a therapeutic dose. And what I mean by that is I can, working with a patient, when we're working on whether it's digestive, we're working to heal the gut, or whether we're during pregnancy, I have a recommended amount I want to achieve, or whether we're trying to shift to a more healthy inflammatory response, I can give you an effective and very efficiently a therapeutic dose where, again, the nutrition that you would have to take in consistently to achieve that might be very difficult from food. I can also get you nutrients that are found in foods that you don't tolerate. So let's say maybe you're lactose intolerant, maybe you're gluten intolerant, maybe you literally just don't tolerate, you don't like, or you don't have access to wild salmon. I can get you the nutrients that are found in there in those foods, and this will be a key thing, in the form that your body is going to recognize. So we will talk about that part, and actually that moves directly into some of the cons. So some of the cons are the quality. There are, just like there is a lot of junky fast food out there, there is a lot of junky dietary supplements, and that's a really important thing and a goal of this session, as well as a goal of my practice. Access can be challenging, and let's really put access and cost together. It may be available to you, but you turn around and say, you know, I don't know that I can afford that on a consistent basis, so maybe you can help me make some choices in that part. And then there's also a compliance issue. You know, there are many things that we need to remember during the day, and I have a lot of parents who tell me, oh my gosh, I always remember to give my child their probiotic, and yet they can't remember to take their own probiotic. And so some of what we have to work on, and some of what I work on, is strategically how to figure out how to make sure that you're getting that in throughout the day. And then, as we talked about, one of the challenges can be we can certainly get excess of nutrients accidentally through, we can also create imbalances. So for example, if I'm getting too much of one nutrient and I'm not getting the other, I can actually create what I call a conditional deficiency. And then some of the other issues are there are herbs, there are ingredients that interact with medications, and other things that if you're not aware of them, they can create health issues. Okay, so let's think about what we actually need. Now I want to go back to, this is really about total nutrition. And this is what I do if you're working with me as a patient, or if you're listening to one of my audio consults and trying to put together a program. And this is what I also recommend for you to do working in conjunction with your practitioner. Some of the statistics, they're staggering when we look at this. And when I'm talking about not getting enough in the United States, I'm talking about not getting enough per our dietary recommendations for preventing disease. 70 to 80% of us, and this depends on your gender and your age, and also certainly on your personal needs, are not getting enough magnesium. 70 to 80%. And yet it drives me crazy when they just did the new labels, the new food labels that'll be out on packages by 2018. The nutrient they focused on was calcium. Magnesium is not mentioned anywhere. So it's really hard for us to even know where to get magnesium. I digress. 75% of us are not getting adequate vitamin D. And even though we call it vitamin D is actually a hormone, and it impacts so many of our hormones. Have to do with thyroid health, it has to do with metabolism, with energy, with diabetes, with chronic disease risk, you know, with how somebody, vitamin D status is looked at in terms of what somebody's potential for success rate is coming out of cancer treatments. I mean, really important. And even on like core vitamins that we think of as pretty simple, you know, 25 to 30% of Americans are not getting enough vitamin A and vitamin C. I did also talk about there are people who are getting too much vitamin A, and we'll talk a little bit about this. So how do you figure out your personal prescription? And that is indeed what you do need. And that is something, I mean, my recommendation is to work with somebody like myself, a dietitian trained in dietary supplements or in total nutrition, or to put together a team for yourself between your practitioner, a dietitian. It's also why I created the audio consults that you can purchase and download. I recommend you do that before going to see your doctor, so you can make sure you get the labs drawn that I recommend, as well as listening to it again once you've gone to your doctor and once you have your lab results. So we're trying to make this easier for you to do more on your own until the U.S. healthcare system catches up and we practice more integratively across the board. But the things that we need to know are your current health status, and that includes your mental health, your physical health. It is really important for you to understand when we talk about your health status, it's about what how you are currently feeling, but also how you are compared to how you have been. That can be a really important marker for us. So I always recommend that people keep your own records every year that you go. I actually have people take photos of them and put them in a file so that you keep the labs, so that you can go back and see what trends are occurring, because the ranges that you see, especially on blood work, where it says, is it in the normal range, you might be on the low side of normal, but that may be where you have always been. Or you might have been on the high side of normal and now you're on the low side of normal, but your practitioner is still going to say, oh, you're in the normal range. And unless they've been working with you for some time period, they're not going to notice what is a very big indicator if you've taken a big jump from one side of the spectrum to the other. We certainly need to know our family history, and again, that's our family history of risk of disease, health status, etc. This one's really important. I want to know what your personal health goals are. Are you, I go through this a lot of times with my patients who come in who are trying to, lose weight for their wedding or their red carpet moment, but I also say to them, okay, but are you thinking of getting pregnant? Are you, okay, I know you want to run a race right now, but what's going on in your work schedule? What's going on in your travel schedule? I need to know those things so that we're making sure that you're not just getting the nutrition you need for that item that you're focused on, but that in whatever we're doing for that is not contrary to what your nutrition status needs to be for the follow-up time period for later on in life. I also need to know what your lifestyle is like. So it can be very convenient for me to tell you how to make a smoothie bowl that'll have all of the nutrients that a multivitamin would have. But if you tell me, you know what, you've never been properly introduced to either your blender or your kitchen, and you always get things when you're out, I need to then be able to tell you what to eat when you're out as opposed to what you're making at home. And the way that we do this is that we evaluate a food journal. And this is one of the most important things. If you're a member of my Better Nutrition program, you know that you can at any point send in to me your food journal and I'll evaluate it, give you some thoughts on that part. And you can also, for free, download my nutrition plan and the how to use it, and you can do this as an exercise at home and see. I always recommend people do a minimum 3 days, try to do 2 weekdays and 1 weekend day, and you'll start to see where gaps may come. And I'm going to teach you a little bit today about what to look for in terms of gaps that impact your dietary supplements. Okay. So how do you get it from your food? I go over, by the way, a ton of this in my Better Nutrition Simplified webinar. Please download that part. But let's talk a little bit about how it relates to dietary supplements. So the first thing is the quality is going to impact the nutrient value. I don't need to get into all of the discussion around, is organic better for you or not. Net, studies show it. Organic has not just more nutrients, but more of the nutrients that nature intended and that you want to get from the food. So for example, blueberries or berries. When they are not sprayed and sort of coddled, if you will, by pesticides, they have to work really hard. And when they work really hard, they produce more of those fighter antioxidants. And those antioxidants have tremendous nutrient value for you. You also, same thing if you look at organic dairy, and I'm talking about full-fat grass-fed dairy, it has more of it has a totally different fat profile and more of the nutrients that you want to be getting. So if the quality of what you're eating has to shift, let's say when your kids go to summer camp, for example, or they go to school and you don't have as much control over the quality, or for yourself when you're traveling, or let's say you're just spending a lot more time at the office and you're eating more of the food there than what you're making at home, then you really need to understand how that nutrient value is being impacted. Now, there are things that are called superfoods that are out there, whether it's I mentioned maca before, I've had, cacao, there are some people call chia seeds and hemp seeds superfoods, and they inherently, I actually go more with the UK on this definition. I think organic, whole, minimally processed or not processed at all food is the most superest that we can get. I don't really tend to think that one food from around the world is going to be more super than another food. For example, love an acai berry, but I also love a blueberry or a marionberry or a loganberry here in the United States. So I'm not as much on the superfoods and their impact, but where I am on is this fortification, and this is a really important one. I am not, even though we for health reasons have fortified foods, and there was some improvement, things like folic acid being added to breads, crackers, things like that. We did see a decline in neural tube defect issues, because especially with maternal health, we need the folic acid. However, I much prefer that you actually get the folate from food for a couple of reasons. First of all, many women today have what they call it a genetic mutation, but we are looking at more than 50% of women having this. So I don't really call it a mutation if it's more than half the population. But anyway, if you have that and your body doesn't do as well with folic acid and it needs the folate, which is the food form, then all of the fortification in the world isn't going to help us as much as getting the actual food form. The other part about it is we tend to find fortification in foods that have been hyper-processed and had a lot of the stuff removed from, a lot of their value removed, and then we throw a bunch of it in. And the final piece is that a lot of times the ingredient type that we're fortifying with is not a high quality form, not as high quality as you would find in a dietary supplement. I find that a lot in bars. I find that a lot in protein powders. I find that in foods that are trying to add protein to them or other nutrients that should be in the whole food but are actually removed from that food and are now just added back. So something to pay attention to. Where are you getting your nutrients from? The quality is going to impact it. Now, a word on quantity, and here I've actually excerpted from Dr. Lodog's book. Just a couple of the ones, remember I pointed out magnesium and vitamin D in particular as ones that the majority of the population tend to be deficient in. In order to reach some of your food needs, look at the quantities. This is in a day. In order to reach the RDA, look what you would have to consume. For B6, 2.5 bananas. That's not going to be in my nutrition recommendations. Remember, half a banana is a serving of carbohydrate. 20 tablespoons of peanut butter. Good luck to you. And if you like 5 ounces of liver, great, but I don't think most of us are eating it every day, and I really don't recommend eating it every day. Vitamin D, this is one of my favorite ones. People say, oh, the reason we need to drink milk is we need to get our vitamin D. Yeah, in order to meet the lowest level, the RDA, which is not even where I want you to be, 5 cups of fortified milk. Well, that alone from a sugar standpoint is not healthy for you. Forget about my dairy conversation, which you can get from my nutrition lesson of if you're going to dairy right. 45 ounces of yogurt. Now, you can get 4 ounces of wild salmon in, and I think that's a really important point to make when you look for ways to get your vitamin D. Great. If you are somebody that a couple times a week eats 4 ounces of wild salmon and you have, from your blood work, seen that your vitamin D is a healthy level, then I might just recommend, once or twice a week on the days that you're not having the salmon, a vitamin D supplement. 15 cups of broccoli. I love broccoli. I do not recommend anyone eats 15 cups of broccoli in one day. 4.5 cups of raisins. Welcome to diabetes for most of us. Magnesium. These numbers are just astounding. And again, 2.5 cups of boiled spinach. Awesome for you. I am super excited if you were eating that in a day. And that, again, if you have healthy levels of magnesium, that could be sufficient for you. But how often are you actually doing that? Okay. So when we talk about dietary supplements, let's talk about how you can actually get in the nutrients. That, remember, for total nutrition, if we're adding supplements in, remember I said it's supplemental to a healthy diet. So we do want to get those foods in that I was just talking about, but we can also add supplements. How do you assess the quality of a supplement? You need to look at 2 things: the active ingredients and the other ingredients that are in there. That is so critical. I was just doing something with my intern, and I said to her, she's like, well, I don't know if this form of calcium is good or not. And I said, okay, so you'll be reading, she's assigned Dr. Lodog's book, and I said, you can read and learn about that. And then I said, but there's something else on there. And we found high fructose corn syrup in the other ingredients. Sometimes I find artificial dyes, like Red Lake, and yellow number 5, and these are red, I guess it's red 5, yellow 1, I don't even know the numbers associated with it. But, these are things that we wouldn't be eating in our food, hopefully, on a regular basis. These are not things we should be taking in a dietary supplement, especially because, remember, our dietary supplements are for our own, we're trying to improve upon our health. I think that part is so important to know. Okay, and the other thing are the form. There are so many forms for us to understand today. And in some instances, even dietary supplements are added to food. So for example, I have a teacup here, Brassica. Remember I was telling you that there is the glucoraphanin, which is TrueBroc. You'll see the TrueBroc logo. So there's a company called Brassica that makes coffee and tea, and it includes that detox ingredient, an active dose of the glucoraphanin included in there for when you're drinking that beverage. So there are so many different forms of dietary supplements today, including functional foods. Some of the goals of dietary supplements are to correct a deficiency. Certainly if we identify that, if we correct it, before we start to medicate the body or look at any other problems that we have, I always send my patients for evaluation. I'll have certain labs drawn, because if it's just a straight up deficiency, let's correct that deficiency. It's kind of like saying if there's a deficiency and instead we're just trying to address whatever problem they have instead of looking at the deficiency. I'll use constipation. And let's say that you're not getting adequate magnesium in, but instead we start throwing at you all of these medications for constipation. Now I have you dependent on a medication, and I also am still not addressing the deficiency, which is going to play out in other issues. You're more likely to have worse cramps and headaches and other things because of the magnesium deficiency. So we always want to know what our deficiencies are. There could be a therapeutic dose. So for example, I mentioned I was on all these antibiotics. Boy, did I need a heck of a lot of probiotics consistently, and I also needed glutamine, prebiotics, etc., to heal my digestive tract to make sure that the probiotics stayed in there. And then we have the goal of optimal health. For my patients, I don't just want you to be getting yourself not well. I want you to be in better health so that when things do happen, you fall a little bit from a health standpoint, but the body has the nutrition needs to restore its better health. And then the frequency, we can look at things that are acute or chronic, meaning you might be dealing, I will call pregnancy actually acute. It is very acute, but it also is something that really only lasts 9 months, so we deal with it during that time. And then, post-pregnancy, we'll deal with postnatal nutrition needs, which are really important for restoring body after baby. And then chronic there are things that are going to be ongoing. Maybe you're somebody who has a chronic issue with pain or with digestive issues or these sorts of things that we will be addressing. Okay, so I want to go through some case studies to put all of this in action for you, and I thought I would start with this one. If everybody takes a moment to flex their muscle, when you flex your muscles, I'm doing right now, you sit up a little bit straighter, you feel the tension go through your body in a good way. You've got that great posture, you feel empowered, you're kind of showing it off. She's got I'm a badass smile on her face. That is totally awesome. That is what calcium does for you. But if I asked you to sit here for a little while longer holding and flexing your muscle like that, at a certain point you're going to go, okay, I'm over this. And that is because we are not meant to exist in a flexed state. We are meant to have relaxation, and that is what magnesium does for us. Magnesium is a muscle relaxant, so it allows our muscles to have that contraction and relaxation that is so critical for heart pumping, for your digestive tract to move the food down and to eliminate waste, for so many of our muscles in the body, certainly that bicep. Also really critical for our bone. We always hear about calcium for our bone, but magnesium is super important for our bone. Magnesium, though, also does something else really important, and that is that it helps with cellular communication around stress. So when we are stressed, remember that's our body's fight or flight, it comes into our body and we get the calcium kicks into our cells, and that's what causes us to be like super alert because we're stressed out and we're ready to deal with it. But remember, we want to relax. We don't want to stay in that super alert space, otherwise we'll get burnout. And so the magnesium that's in your cells is meant to kick that calcium out. If you don't have enough of that in there, we got some problems. Some of the problems that can happen are we can feel stressed out all of the time. We can burn our adrenals out. We can have digestive issues. We can have weight and body composition challenges. You can feel like we're just fatter, even if we're skinny. We can be that skinny fat. We can have trouble losing weight because our body is not either working optimally digestively or it's not relaxing enough to allow what needs to happen metabolically for weight loss. So one of the important things for us to understand when it comes to magnesium, calcium, is that it is our total intake. It is our food plus our supplement intake. Somewhere along the line, communication got really confused, and we started to think about calcium needs as only supplemental needs. And so it was just this recommendation of especially every woman, especially a small woman, especially a small Caucasian woman, okay, now everybody needs 1,200 milligrams of supplemental calcium. What a mistake. And what we started to see is more and more of these issues of what I call conditional deficiencies, which was, there are many of us that are getting at least that amount from our food on a daily basis, and now we're adding another 1,200 milligrams, and we have insufficient amounts of magnesium to have that balance that we need, that 1-to-1 or even slightly a higher amount of magnesium. And so one of the things for me that from a case study standpoint is that I'll share actually, hundreds of thousands of case studies at this point. I shouldn't say hundreds of thousands. I'll share hundreds and probably 1,000 at this point, which is I have taken people off of calcium supplements. I do that frequently. I certainly lower calcium intake, but I almost always add magnesium. And I do add Natural Calm. The magnesium citrate is a highly absorbable form. There are other absorbable forms. They tend to be pretty expensive. The other thing about Natural Calm is that it's in a powdered form, and I really like that. It allows me to adjust dose, but it also makes it really easy to get in. I actually add it to herbal tea at night, or I have it plain. I always take it with me on the airplane, and now I take double the amount, not because I need double the amount, but because every time a flight attendant or someone sitting next to me sees what I'm taking, then they ask me about why I'm taking it, and I explain why I'm taking it, and then they have this look on their face that is like they're stressed out now, and so then I have to share. So key thing, it's when we're looking at magnesium and calcium, it's so important to look at that combination. Okay, another case study conversation. Fiber, prebiotics, probiotics, glutamine, and colostrum. So one of the things that was a real wake-up call for me, certainly I learned about probiotics. I have been taking a line since actually before it was invented. That's a Bifantis strain. It has strain specificity. It is a proven strain. And I take it to maintain a healthy digestive system, maintain that healthy balance of the good and the bad bacteria. And for me, that was really critical. And when I would introduce probiotics to patients, I would see improvement almost across the board. However, sometimes I didn't see the improvement go the full way, and that included with myself. And part of what I had to learn about is something called leaky gut, where the impact of medications, steroids, certainly antibiotics. It can also be if you've taken medications or things like birth control, oral contraceptives, different things, and then just sheer fact of stress and stressful situations in life, they can create more of a leakiness throughout the mucosal layer of our digestive tract. And we have people who are not breastfed. That's okay. You can get the nutrients from formula. But if you didn't get all of those nutrients, then it can also be something that starts from the early days in youth, and where you have more of a leaky gut. And I see that with a lot of patients who, they're coming to me as children, or their parents are bringing to me in the early years because they have food allergies and intolerances, or things that are worse than that. And part of it is we have to make sure that we repair the digestive lining, because your digestive lining is part of your immune system, and it's also part of your digestive system, in that, remember, I always use the expression, you are not what you eat, you are what you digest and absorb. And that absorption, or that targeting things for elimination, needs to occur with a healthy digestive tract lining. So there we're talking about digestive health. I mentioned immune health. We certainly are talking about energy, because the energy that comes into your body by way of food and even by way of dietary supplements you can't be turned into energy unless you have proper digestion and absorption. And certainly this impacts weight and body composition. So for me, I have a sort of a patented approach, mostly with probiotics and fiber. I recommend sources of, typically I'm doing that from a food standpoint. There's no reason not to. So I have great choices there. I mentioned hemp before, great source of fiber. And in addition, you get healthy fats coming in to reduce inflammation. That's great for the digestive system. But I use something from Metagenics called Glutagenics, and it's a powder. Again, you'll hear me, I'm a really big fan of powders, especially with digestive health. And I have my patients take that. Anyone who is taking a probiotic and may not be getting the full results. The other place that I use that is with acid reflux, or with when somebody has experienced maybe esophagitis, some irritation and inflammation throughout the digestive tract, so that we can repair that digestive tract lining and make it a hospitable environment for the good bacteria. Okay, another one, omegas. You'll see that I have hemp oil, hemp seeds, hemp powder here. I could have wild salmon here. I could have walnuts here. There's so many amazing sources of omegas, and we need our omegas. We need our essential fatty acids. That is, by definition, they are called essential. Again, food plus supplement equals total intake. And we have to be really careful about creating a conditional deficiency, where if we overemphasize trying to get in one type of essential fatty acid over the 16 at minimum, 16 different omegas that are at minimum found in, for example, wild salmon. Not all of them are essential, but some of them can be conditionally essential. And if we overemphasize just one, what are we doing to the balance in our body? And that's as harmful, in my opinion, as trying to correct an imbalance that may have existed in dietary patterns. For example, we've been getting more of the omega-6 in our diet, much more, and so that's why it's been so important that we've paid attention to omega-3s. So I'm a really big fan of whole food sources, and equally, one of the things that is so critical, I am not a fan of most omega-3 supplements, isolating a DHA, isolating an EPA. Part of the reason is that's not even all of the omega-3s. There's HPA in there. There are probably a couple of others that someday we'll figure out. And we know that they work in conjunction. In nature, they're found with other omegas, and they work in conjunction with those other omegas. And so I think it's risky and potentially harmful when we've escalated our intake of isolates of an omega-3 and just said, like, oh, DHA for maternal health. We have to get, just that DHA in. Now, I am comfortable with small amounts of that to supplement, to achieve a, again, if we're not getting it in consistently during the day, we might be getting in an isolate of DHA or an isolate of EPA, or using that therapeutically under the guidance of a practitioner. There may be rationales for it, but as just what my overall recommendations, I recommend things like new chapters, whole omega, which is wild salmon, fish oil, and you're getting that whole wild salmon, hemp seed oil, especially for my perimenopausal and menopausal women, or for anyone who's dealing with PMS. You get that beautiful blend from hemp. You get the gamma-linoleic fatty acid, which is an omega-6. You get other omega-3s. You get other omegas in there. So the form is going to be, in the supplement space, is also going to be really important, because oils, we need to make sure that they're really good quality and that they retain their quality for the duration of the time that you're taking them as well. So the omegas are going to be a really important area too. Detoxification. I talk a lot about this. I have an entire webinar, so please check that one out. It is so important that we support our body's own detoxification system to identify, modify, and remove toxins from the body. The modify is really critical because some of the toxins that we identify cannot be removed until they are modified. They must all be eliminated, and that is going to require certain nutrients. I talked a fair amount about glucoraphanin from broccoli. I just really want to emphasize that because there are two pathways to your detoxification system, some of the, especially in a multi, some of the minerals and vitamins that you're getting will help target one side of, or one phase of detoxification. But unless you're getting the second phase, that one that can modify and help with the elimination, where you're getting things like glucoraphanin, then it can be really difficult and you may not be supporting your body's total detoxification. Okay, and finally, I wanted to just talk for a moment about P and pre and postnatal nutrition. By the way, they are not the same. We know that, but we really need to know that. So in the beginning, when you're pregnant, you're focusing, or just before pregnancy, you're focusing on you and your baby's health. You're focusing on how do you create and support and inform healthy development for the baby, and also inform your body to be supporting that pregnancy all the way through delivery. After that fact, we're certainly still working on creating, especially with breast milk, we want to be creating that. We're working on supporting, and now we're working on supporting your own health and making sure that you have enough energy to be taking care of your young child, as well as replenishing nutrient stores that were lost. And they were lost in a wonderful way. They were given over to that new body, and some of them were lost through the birthing process itself. That's so critical because I have women who go into a second pregnancy fairly quickly, and by quickly I could mean 2 or 3 years later, and you want to make sure that your body is not the worse for the wear. The body is always going to take care of the developing child, should always take care of the developing child, but if it leaves you nutrient depleted, that has implications for your better health overall, as well as things like your energy and et cetera. So there's also just the impact of stress. Remember, we talked about stress having a digestive impact. Stress impacts how the body uses and delivers nutrients, that digestion and that absorption. It impacts how we allocate energy. And then there's also the fact of when we're in a stressed out situation, we tend to not eat as well. And so that can impact our nutrition that we're getting in. That's where I do believe that a quality pre and a postnatal are so great as far as maintaining a healthy foundation for mom for her child. And there was just a recent study that I think it was a study or review out of the UK. I was so frustrated by it, basically saying like, blah, prenatal is not showing their worth. Yes, we need extra vitamin D. Yes, we need extra folate during pregnancy, but the rest of it, eh. And then it was like, yeah, the rest of it, but have you ever been a pregnant woman who has tried to consistently, day in and day out, get her nutrition needs met? Harken back to the slide that I showed before of what it takes to get adequate iron or what it takes to get adequate B6. Are you eating 2.5 bananas in a day? That's not going to support a healthy pregnancy. So I think that there's just a tremendous amount of value in a quality pre and postnatal that certainly needs to be well tolerated. So I like the ones that are fermented or that are made from whole foods. I certainly want them to be organic, but that's going to be so important for you. And to note that there is a difference in the nutrients as soon as the nutrients that your body needs for yourself, as well as creating and supporting a healthy baby after pregnancy as well. So I think it's really important in that space to pay attention to the postnatal. Okay, so I want to take some time. I want to jump into questions, but I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to mention some of the resources. I've mentioned Tirona's book. Matt will announce who our lucky winner is. I do have my personal shopper. It's free for you to go on there and check. You can vet the supplements that you're taking to see if they're on there. That just means that I think they're better quality. If they're not on there, it means that they probably didn't pass because I've evaluated most of them, they probably didn't pass my standards. But the other thing is I could have not evaluated it. There are always new supplements, so please send me an email and I'll let you know. And then there are some great resources to look for over here on the right. I've got NSF, USDA Organic, USP. These are great things to look for where these are organizations that are doing legwork, really even beyond what I'm capable of doing. So I rely on them as well, checking the quality of the ingredients. And then these other here are labs that you can actually check, order for yourself, and you will be able to check and see certain levels of some of the core nutrients that can help you in and you can certainly share them obviously with your doctor, but if you want to check up on things for yourself to see if you might have certain deficiencies or just know what your current levels are, then you can use those as well. Some of my favorites, these are companies that at different times have paid me for work, but I really do that and engage with them because I think what they are doing is the top of the top. I will point out, because I haven't talked much about it or at all today, about homeopathics. They're one of my first line interventions. I'm also a huge fan of enzymes. I think in terms of everything else over here, I've talked about it. Oh, Ultima Replenisher, one of my favorites, supplements for hydration, very important, especially in the summer. So there are some of my favorites. And just a quick reminder before we jump into the Q&A, we have another one about back to school. And remember, one of the hardest things that I identify during back to school in terms of back to school nutrition is actually parents not seeing their nutrition tank as their kids go back to school. It can be a tough time of year. So let's certainly all come together to talk about that, and that will be on August 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So I look forward to that. And Matt, I'll turn it back over to you if we have some time for questions.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. Yes, we have some questions that have come in. So let me just start with the first one. How do I know when to take my supplements versus my medications?
That's a really great question. And one of the things that frustrates me a lot is the lack of people on your team, if you will, all talking to each other. But you need to be proactive in this space. So now I'm talking to you, the patient. I'll talk to the practitioner in a second. So you, the patient, need to make sure that your doctor knows the dietary supplements that you're taking. The easiest thing in the world today is to take photos of the front and the back of them, keep them in a folder. When you go to the doctor's office, make sure that you give them access to that. And that way, when you are taking a medication or when the doctor's recommending a medication, they can vet the particular supplement that you're taking to the best of their ability to see if there are any contraindications. Great one that I didn't even mention today is that, for example, if you're taking a statin, you need to be taking CoQ10, but you don't want to take them at the same time of the day. In fact, you want to take them very far apart from each other. I talk more about that in a recent blog. One of the other things that should happen is when you're at the pharmacist and you're getting your medication, part of what they should include on there are any contraindications. That typically does not go as far as including, hey, this, take this at a different time than your multi. So the third piece that I will say is that's a really critical time to work with somebody like myself to identify a practitioner or resource that you can figure out, when you should be taking some of these things together or separately. And the final piece that I'll say is, if your body rebels, if you do not feel good when you are taking a supplement and a medication or a series of supplements together, that is the best indicator that they are not meant to be taken together. There are all of these great supplements that exist out there, but I have had people who all those supplements literally ruin their breakfast or literally ruin how they feel for the rest of the day or for a period of the day, and that's not a health win. So even if your practitioner has recommended that you take several of them together at one time, but if it's not working for you, you need to go back to them and get a plan and adjust it and get a plan that will work. So practitioners, in hearing what I just said to our patients, I think you need to think about each of those areas and anything that you can do to be more helpful in that space, including asking on your intake form what dietary supplements are people taking. And remember, that can include something as innocuous as a fiber supplement that literally, one of the fiber supplements that one of my patients took had licorice root in it, and it caused her to have high blood pressure, and her doctor was prescribing a medication, and it wasn't until I asked her how her constipation was that she told me it was fine because she was taking this fiber supplement, that I identified that the licorice root was in there. I went back to her cardiologist and said she does not need a high blood pressure medication. She needs to get off this fiber supplement. And so, there's a lot that we have to figure out in that space and be aware of.
Okay, thank you. Question two. Do you think supplements can keep you from needing a medication?
This is a question that I get all the time. And here is my answer. Possibly. But what really keeps you from needing a medication is better total nutrition. So there are foods and there are ways of eating, and there are ways of eating that can cause you to need medication, and there are ways of eating that can cause you to reduce the amount of medication. And there are certain supplements that we try sometimes before starting on a medication. But my recommendation is not to go to your doctor, be prescribed a medication, go home, Google dietary supplements that can replace this medication, and then take that medication. Take that supplement. Then you're not doing yourself a favor. So I think the real key is to work with a practitioner who is involved with dietary supplements. And I recognize that this is a little bit of a catch-22. We do not have, especially in the medical field with doctors and nurse practitioners today, they are not as well educated on dietary supplements as we hope they will be in the future. Integrative practitioners, functional medicine practitioners, they're likely to be more educated in this space. So I think that that's something to explore, and I am always here as a resource for you if you have those questions.
Okay, question three. How do you help patients prioritize supplements if they can't afford all the ones recommended?
That is an awesome point. So just in the same way that I could create a designer, and it's actually probably easier, a designer meal plan, I call it designer. I could create a meal plan, that is $200 a day, and it's going to give you as close to perfect nutrition. There is no such thing, but as close to perfect nutrition as possible, and you're going to like it, and it's going to arrive at your door and be ready for you and for your family. And oh, by the way, it means you get to eat out at a great restaurant as well. We can do all of that. That's like almost nobody's reality. And so in the same way that when I'm making food recommendations, I have to make adjustments for. So people will say to me, you know what, I don't have access to, or I can't afford organic across the board. And they'll say to me, what can I do? And I say, well, let's focus on what are the things that you're doing most often, and also what are some of the biggest risk factors in food where organic is going to be really part of the better nutrition solution. And the same thing in the dietary supplement space. So sometimes the thing that I throw out and don't have someone take is the multivitamin, multimineral. As much as we talk about that being foundational, if your diet is foundational in quality, I may really need you to take that CoQ10, and CoQ10 is not cheap, and I want you to take that because you are on a statin, but there are other things that I can do from a food standpoint, and so we'll get rid of, you know, the multi so that I can afford the CoQ10. So part of it is just a strategic discussion, and the other part of it is not going to a cheaper version of the same supplement, because very often, I mean, with supplements, you really typically are getting what you pay for. If you don't have to buy the highest end, and some of the stuff high end is actually some of the stuff that fails from a quality standpoint for me, especially if it's branded with somebody's name and face on it, and you know, is giving you promising to cure things that you don't even have yet. But you know, there's a middle area there, and that's really the sweet spot for dietary supplements. And so I think it's, you know, if we focus on what do you actually need in the moment for us to reach your health goals in the moment, then we can reduce what they need at that point.
Thanks, Ashley. They were the questions that we got asked.
Who won the giveaway?
Yes, we did the draw. Beth Heffron, you are the winner. So I'll reach out to you via email to get your address, and we'll send Dr. Lodog's book, Dr. Lodog's book, Fortify Your Life, to you. Congratulations. I also noticed that several people got into the webinar a few minutes late, 5 minutes late. So the webinar will be up on Ashley's Facebook and on her YouTube channel if you want to watch it from the beginning, or if there was something that you wanted to hear again that she mentioned. So thanks for joining. And like Ashley said, the next webinar, Better Back to School Nutrition Simplified, is August the 25th at 2 p.m. So we hope to see you then. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, everyone.